Finally, the weather cools, and we welcome fall. Best becomes boost, and all stays all. Mwah, ha, 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 ha.
Hello and welcome to Boost of All, a little Halloween special here on the Best of All podcast, to fit the vibe of changing leaves and fun costumes and things that creep in the shadows. I'm Scott D. Forsyth, professional voice actor, pop culture enthusiast, and your host of this wonderful show. Today's topic is my favorite TV series. It's technically a miniseries, Over the Garden Wall. I'll be going over the who's, how's, what's, and why I'm recommending it to a general audience, thus claiming it best of all. But first, let's take a quick break and get right back to the show. So, what is Over the Garden Wall? Well, it's a standalone TV series. It's technically a miniseries. It's only 10 episodes long, that follows the adventures of two brothers, Wirt and Greg, as they travel through a mysterious wood, unsure of how they got there or how to get back home. And the deeper they go, the more unusual this unknown place becomes. The place is called The Unknown. So if you've seen it, you're like, oh man, Scotty, that was perfect. But you might also be thinking, who is in the cast? Is there anyone I might recognize? Oh, most certainly. Elijah Wood from Lord of the Rings fame. He's done other stuff too, but I mean, Frodo. He plays Wirt, the oldest brother of the two main characters. And Greg is played by Colin Dean, an actor now most known for, I think, like seasons 2 and 3 of The Loud House, a hugely popular children's cartoon on Nickelodeon. But before Over the Garden Wall, he did Adventure Time, and he was Tiffany, this kind of reoccurring character, very small part, but really, really memorable. Rounding out the rest of the primary cast, there is a bluebird named Beatrice, who is played by Melina Linsky. I believe I said her name right.
Hey, this is post-production Scotty. Bud, you said her name wrong completely. It's Melanie Linsky. Melanie Linsky. Not whatever you said. How did you get that? All right, anyway, get back to the show.
She played the neighbor Rose in 2.5 Men. And apparently she's also a pretty big character in Yellow Jacket, this kind of hit TV series that I know a lot of people really like. I have not watched any of it. But yeah, like she's credited for that as well. And the character Beatrice helps guide the boys through the unknown. And then there is a woodsman who is just known as the Woodsman, played by Christopher Lloyd of Back to the Future fame and Clue fame of Clue fame, who keeps running into the trio for various different reasons. He's a mysterious character, but the more you watch the series, the more you get to know him more. And everybody in the cast is phenomenal. I mean, these are all powerhouse actors. And then even the reoccurring characters and special guest characters have like megastars like Tim Curry and John Cleese, people like Jack Jones. But yeah, the whole cast was something that caught my eye when I first heard about the series in 2014. Cartoon Network would play these short little promos highlighting the actors on the series, kind of showing a little bit of the like behind the scenes stuff, which is really interesting for them promoting a show, especially a show that was like kind of geared towards kids, or at least the network is geared towards kids. But as these promos continued, and I'm putting a focus on these promos because they premiered like a week before the show was going to air, which the show originally released in November 3rd through November 7th in 2014. So it is a post-Halloween show. At least that's where it was like released. And that's kind of how I like to see it, but I'll get more into that a little bit later. But these promos and how they were making the series the art, the music just like really grabbed my attention. So they did a phenomenal job of marketing it, of just showing like, hey, there's a miniseries that's going to come out for 1 week. This is what it's about. This is who's in it. Enjoy yourselves. So that little sidetrack train of thought has helped answer the when and where of the for this episode. So let's get into the why. Why do I think Over the Garden Wall is best of all? And I mean that in the most literal sense. I genuinely believe that Over the Garden Wall is like one of the most special and spectacular series to ever be created in any form of fiction, ever. I mean, this miniseries is something that is so refreshingly new, especially at the time of release. To give a little bit of a history, put yourself back in the 2010s. Cartoon Network was unknowingly succeeding in cult classic animation. Regular Show and Adventure Time, which they actually released in 2009, but they're considered 2010s aughts, right? That's what that decade's called? No, that's the one before that. So, in 2009, these shows were released, but a lot of people kind of group them in this kind of Cartoon Network renaissance that started really with Adventure Time. And along this, Steven Universe was just releasing and coming out. So you had these series that started out as like funny, silly, 11-minute, like serialized, no, not serialized, just comedic episodes, shows that as the series went on for all the three that I just mentioned, they really pushed a pretty heavy narrative that showed and fleshed out a very in-depth world, really multi-layered characters, and like some incredibly strong emotional themes that you didn't particularly see in animation, especially at the time, or if you did, it was very seldom. So all of this is like happening, and it's like beginning to blow up Cartoon Network in the best way possible. But on the flip side, Cartoon Network was closing out the like hugest blight on their record with something called CN Real. This series was a bunch of live action shows that had like little to do with animation and cartoons. So strange to see like real people and game shows and competitions and sketch comedy on a network that's whole premise and focus was cartoons. So, and that was received very poorly. Even nowadays, it's still looked on as like kind of an embarrassment. So the network, as well as the rest of the animation industry, was in this very awkward transition, trying to find programs people would like to watch, shows that audience wanted to stick with. Creators were trying to see, like I mentioned before with Adventure Time and Steven Universe, Regular Show, were really pushing animation as a medium further than it had ever been before, especially since animation has been notoriously just labeled as this is only for kids. Yeah, we have like Avatar before all of this, and around this time Gravity Falls was coming out, which was pretty influential in this like boom of like really great animated series. But for me, if it wasn't for Over the Garden Wall, the rest of the series that came after, I don't think would have happened, because Cartoon Network was like, hey, we're in a weird place. This person just wants to make a solid 10-episode thing. Let's just say, go for it. If it flops, we'll never talk about it again. We'll just see what happens. And that's exactly what Patrick McHale, the creator and showrunner and like brain behind Over the Garden Wall. I'm currently wearing a hat because I'm wearing a costume. For those who cannot see that we are now on camera, I have to take it off. I've been doing a balancing act this whole time. It has to go. I'm sorry. The rest of the costume will work. But Patrick McHale, he had worked in Adventure Time. He became like creative director for a little bit. And he also worked on The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, which is a show I definitely want to talk about on this series because it is so important to literally every show that I've mentioned before. It's great. So clearly, Patrick McHale is someone who's been in the industry for a long time and apparently has been working and tooling Over the Garden Wall into the series that it would eventually become. He started pitching the series in the mid-2000s to different networks, and then it became a short film called Tomb of the Unknown Harvest Melody, which was praised for its story and animation, and that's what, really... like that was the final straw for Cartoon Network in a good way, to say like, okay, well, let's take a shot on this series. It was originally supposed to be a lot longer, but Patrick McHale and his team was just like, look, let's just do these 10 episodes the best we can. And like just reading a little bit about how McHale like made this, which again, I'll get into of why it's so important. To me, he just kept trimming and trimming. It was the epitome of like the term kill your darlings, which is a writing term of like removing things that aren't necessary. And that's exactly how Over the Garden Wall became the 10 episode miniseries, because he's like, hey, I think this format fits the story the best. And so all of that was a rabbit trail, and I'm sorry that it was so long, to show that this series was not only special to McHale and myself. I did not work on it. It's just, I love it so much. But it was influential to the animation as a whole. To me, that comes across in spades in the final product. I'm nervous. I keep swallowing my own words. The whole like journey of Wirt and Greg is filled with such whimsy and childlike wonder. Like the unknown is such a magical world to be in. As a setting, there is something so familiar about it, and so, for lack of a better term, unknown. McHale and his team drew inspiration from old Americana like media, so old postcards and illustrations, kind of giving this like 1800s feel. It's just really, really great. And I've really talked about and hyped up this like whimsy and fun and like beauty of everything. But at the same time, Over the Garden Wall has a lot of supernatural elements to create a very fairy tale like atmosphere. One of the aspects of Over the Garden Wall that I love is it feels like a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. I feel like I could sit down and tell my kid, I don't have a kid, but if I did, I could go camping with them and have their friends be at the campfire, and I could tell the story about Wirt and Greg and the unknown woods, and the tone, setting, and story would still be there. It feels like something that you would have found, or that people in the 1800s or even longer than that would have enjoyed hearing about in a spoken word format. And I say all of that not to take away from it being in the medium of animation, because the show benefits so highly from being a cartoon. Hearing about the story and imagining and like picturing what your mind will create is wonderful. But watching it literally unfold before your eyes in such beautiful backgrounds and delightfully colorful characters that are cute and familiar, but they also feel like a cartoon. I think this show has and looks a lot like what a lot of people like to say, the cow art style, kind of big eyes, big mouths, very simple shapes. But I've always liked that style. I've never been one to critique it. But because of the colors that they use and that there's not a contrast between the backgrounds, but like the backgrounds are like painstakingly painted in these like beautiful museum worthy like cells. I don't think it was hand drawn. I think it was done with computers, but it's just like one of the most gorgeous things Cartoon Network has ever produced. So seeing all of that is important, and it definitely like uplifts the series. there is a very specific reason that it was put around the time of this Halloween, post-Halloween time period. Because there is a bit of a sinister undertone to over the garden wall, as the boys do not know how they've got to the unknown. They don't know how to get out. They're trusting characters that are so bizarre and unusual to their own world, or we assume their own world. And it's such a unique place because like it doesn't dip into like full horror. The show gets creepy and it gets spooky for sure. But like the series was made for a network of like people who watch cartoons who are like under the age of 18. That's their market. Clearly, I watched this show when I was much older than 18, and I still watch it now, and I still watch Cartoon Network. But it's just like it blends the fear and whimsy, and that's like my absolute jam. That like this tone of being like cute and funny, and then it's sometimes like uncomfortable, and then outright frightening in some situations, like is my favorite thing. I think it's so wonderful, and it's very human. I've thought about like why do I like horror, even though I grew up not liking it and totally like repulsed by it. And then now as I get a little bit older, there's still some stuff I don't particularly like, but like I've mentioned What We Do in the Shadows and Get Out on other episodes, which you can listen to on Best of All. It's like, yeah, and those are pretty R-rated, scary stories, but it's like the human element of being lost and afraid is something that everybody can relate to. And so that emotional like tie and feeling is like really present in Over the Garden Wall. And I think is perfect for a younger audience because like every kid has been lost in the store or in a place where they don't understand, even though it's like you feel like you should understand this, but you can't. It's so unique. If you enjoy this series like I did and want to delve in like more, there is so much to find in this series. A big emphasis of things that I recommend on Best of All is like finding things that will meet you where you're at. And it's like, if you just want to enjoy a nice little story, if you just want to watch Over the Garden Wall in the like 2.5 hours that it takes, do it. If you want to be like me and how it was originally released and watch it every day for 5 days, like 2 episodes a day, and then chew on the different episodes and like think about what was going on and just like really absorb the whole series, you can. Again, one of my favorite things about Best of All is finding things that are for a general audience, and that being, it's like if you want to just enjoy it, you can. If you want to like delve into it and become fully engrossed and obsessed with something, you absolutely can. And I think that's such a magical and novel thing about media, that there are a lot of stuff that don't do that. A lot of the stuff that I watch do, but which is why I have a podcast about media I would recommend. I've talked about mostly like the tone and the animation, and I haven't gone into like the like details of the story or the cast. I'm frustrated with myself that I didn't do all of this in this episode, but I also did make a short video essay around the time of its original release, which is still on the ScottyMeLad YouTube channel, which you can go and check out. But I feel that, and where I am now in my life, seeing this achievement of this series and seeing a network take a risk on something that's so different and so legitimately unique is such a special treat that a lot of people, I think, take for granted. Granted. Especially now when networks are really screwing over animation and creators and like only wanting to do what's safe. So seeing something that is so out of the realm of what Cartoon Network was known for, or does, and then to show that it pays off. This was the first miniseries that Cartoon Network ever did, and then right after that, they made a handful of Adventure Time miniseries on Cartoon Network and on HBO Max that were received so well and like are some of the best of Adventure Time. And that wouldn't have happened if they didn't take a risk on Over the Garden Wall. So it's like where I am in my life nowadays, it's like that aspect is so important to me and is so incredible. And it shows that it can be done. And it makes me excited for the future of different creators, whether they're going to create stuff privately or and self-publish and release their own stuff, or have other networks actually take a risk on projects that people are clearly passionate about that can resonate with people, and then they can become equally as passionate. Not equally. Clearly, Patrick McHale is more excited about Over the Garden Wall than I am, but it's like I have a lot of love for this series, and it's like as a super fan, every year I take the time to watch it around this time, and I've done that since 2014. I know this series back and forth, and I've watched it dozens of times. I've watched it even outside of my like designated, like, okay, this is my Over the Garden Wall season. And it still just feels enriching and it feels magical no matter how many times that I see it. And it's just one that if you haven't seen it, I wholeheartely recommend. It is something so incredibly special that needs to be on everybody's radar. You've heard me gush about this miniseries, and you could watch me and tons of other people gush about this miniseries. But your lingering question might be, how can I watch it? Well, it's available on digital and DVD, which I highly recommend because things are getting taken off streaming services all the time. But it is also available on HBO Max. So that is all of the ways I can recommend you watch. There are other ways that as a professional voice actor, I cannot recommend. But yeah, go support this series. There's also like graphic novels and comic books that enhance elements of the story and continue the story as well. I haven't read all of them, but the few that I've read have been really, really good. It also just shows that this was a great creative team behind the whole series, and it wasn't just solely on the shoulders of Patrick McHale. But who did an amazing job. So there's the what's what on Over the Garden Wall, my favorite piece of animation ever. If you have any other thoughts on the best animation has to offer, you can feel free to email us at ScottyMeLad.com. Your letter might be read on the show. You can also support us on Ko-fi at Ko-fi.com/ScottyMeLad by donating or giving monthly. You can gain access to behind-the-scenes content, engage with the community, and help us reach goals to improve our podcast, just like I'm doing Best of All is now on video, and you can see my face while I talk, and look at me while I read my own script off camera, because that's how I've been doing the show. And all of that is because of the great people at Ko-fi, like Jake and Jay and Vicky. Hopefully you've taken something out of this episode and will give Over the Garden Wall a shot or a rewatch if you're like me. But best of all, you are a listener, and we at ScottyMeLad thank Boo because it's Halloween. Get it? Best of all, boost of all. It's a great pun. It's so good. That's my closer. That's where I'm gonna end things. Very nice. That's a long episode. It's almost like this is my favorite thing in the world. Best of All was hosted and produced by Scott D. Forsythe, using the song Mia by Rolando Puchades from the album Canta as our intro and outro theme.